Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our third episode of Wrestle Rewind. You are here live with The Core, featuring myself, Tommy T, joined as usual by Double K and Smokey Z, and we are here tonight to bring you an update throughout the wrestling world and talk about the business as a whole from our perspective as three fans. I can't count tonight. It has been a long day, but we're going to start right off the top, and Double K, I don't know about you guys, but I want to talk about the WWE and the introduction of the wild card rule and my ability to understand it.
Well, it's because there was the introduction.
Yeah.
And then immediately about an hour later, there was an amendment to the introduction. And then it just got crazier on Tuesday night because they seemingly didn't do what it sounded like they said they were going to do on Monday. So, if you're not thoroughly confused yet, I'm trying my best to get you there.
I'm super confused. I have no idea.
So, it started out with you have three stars that can, perform on the opposite show at any given time, and that quickly changed before the end of the night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Roman Reigns kicked the entire thing off. With his tweet announcing that he was kicking off Raw. He's a SmackDown superstar, kicking off Raw, 8 p.m. sharp, get my music ready.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there it was. It happened. Vince is in the ring doing Vince-like things, and then you hear the big dog's music, and here he is.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, he didn't exactly shock the world by showing up. I mean, he did what he said he was going to do.
Right.
But I think for me, the confusing part is, so what's your deal? What are you trying to do with this? Of course, I believe a lot of it's directly related to ratings.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But I think another huge part of this is they're afraid to dedicate their star power, because now let's think about the WWE is pretty simple right now, all things considered. Mm-hmm. 2 shows, 1 television network. This gets very complicated once we get into the fall, when SmackDown moves to being SmackDown Live on Friday nights on Fox.
Right.
So this is going to look very different for us in just 6 months' time, because nobody really knows what this looks like. I mean, we haven't seen it before. We haven't seen 2 shows, so let's think about this. Fox isn't going to want their ratings to be worse than Monday Night Raw.
No,
those are competing media networks.
Yeah, well, you've in effect, with WWE, they've started their own, or I feel like it's going to be similar to their own civil war. They're going to have their own show trying to eat the other show.
But how do you do that?
I'm not
How
sure.
do you do it and you're successful at doing it?
I don't know. Because like you said, we've never actually seen it before.
Done.
In the same company.
Well, that's true. So we saw the competing networks between TNT, TBS, and USA when we had the Monday Night Wars. But now you've got a new twist to this, because we're fully expecting AEW to announce a television deal next week.
On Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays, a night that WWE is going to be abandoning. Now, how does that add to this new mixture?
So you'll have 3 competing shows. You'll have AEW and Raw and SmackDown.
Well, so we can't confuse 2 competing shows for one company, though. So even though Raw and SmackDown are 2 different networks, they're still the same company. So the company doesn't care which one of the shows is any better than the other. In fact, I would want to believe that if I think about this from a business perspective, I would want SmackDown to initially do better than Raw, at least in the beginning, because if you're planning a long-term partnership with Fox, you're going to want to show them that you can deliver on the product that you're bringing to their network.
Well, and ultimately, for how many years now? We'll just go with a lot of years now. Vince has always been able to figure all of it out.
He's the mastermind.
Vince has always been able to figure it out. I don't see. I see this being extremely probably complex and complicated behind the scenes for sure to figure out. But I don't see him not figuring it out. And honestly, I don't believe that Tuesday nights, with AEW, in my opinion, I don't feel are going to create as big of a problem as people are thinking or wanting it to. Because I think what happens at that point, how long has it been now that WWE has not had to step their game up for competition?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's been since 2001.
Right. So now,
18 years ago.
yeah,
That's hard to believe.
You had hair back then.
I did have hair back then.
It's been a while.
It has. It has.
But I think what happens is only a positive for viewers. AEW is going to provide exactly what we think they're going to provide as far as their product goes. Again, like I said a minute ago, I don't feel like they're going to provide what people think or want them to provide as a competition to WWE, because then what happens is, in my opinion, is that WWE now really actually steps their game back up.
Well, I think they have to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They'll just step their game back up. I think you see more probably NXT call-ups to the main roster that don't get buried at that point.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with them? Your rosters are already stacked. You already don't showcase the talent that you have.
Well, I mean, you've got to restructure your show.
You got to figure something out.
I feel like the show has to be restructured at that point, because right now, out of a 3-hour Monday night show, there's probably a solid hour and a half of promos.
Which is absurd.
Right. And there's probably a solid, on any given night, maybe not every night, but on any given night, there's a solid hour and a half of promos.
Yeah, and that's absurd.
And then you get some mediocre, matches here and there for maybe an hour, and then you get maybe a 20-minute main event that's pretty good. Right. And then some nights they light it up depending on what's going on or where they are.
Normally it's when they get close to a pay-per-view is when those main events.
Well, yeah. And then obviously in WrestleMania season, they're always, it's always exciting because you don't know who's showing up and when. It's like a 3-month-long Royal Rumble when you don't know who the surprise guest is going to be tonight.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But I think what has to happen in order for this to work when AEW goes live or whatever they're going to do on Tuesday nights is, instead of an hour and a half of wrestling and now you've got an hour and a half of promos, I think we've got to cut those promos down if you're WWE, right? And now you've got to make it about the wrestling.
Put on better matches.
Well, and I definitely think that's what AEW is going to bring to the table, is more of the sports side of the business.
Right.
And we know that that's something that WWE has. They're trying to deliver when it comes to SmackDown. When it moves to Fox, Fox has been very clear that they want a more sports-based product. But
They're going to change the whole look, don't they?
Well, yeah, because they don't want to be confused with carrying or supporting a product that's being presented by one of their competitors. I mean, look, I'm a business guy. I mean, that's my forte. That's what I do. And I can tell you right now that if I was an executive for, and I'm not an executive for Fox, but I wish I was. I wish I had that kind of money. But the reality of it is that if I was one of those guys, I would be looking at Vince McMahon and I would say, look, I know right now you guys have the same setup on both shows. Your entrances look the same. Your rings are designed the same. I don't want that because we don't want to represent their product. I want something that looks and feels completely different so that they know we're not trying to broadcast somebody else's program. From a marketing standpoint, like that's how you would want to present that.
Well, sure, but think back to when SmackDown was pretty new. All right.
Originally.
You
Okay.
you had the fist coming through.
Well, that wasn't even then. It was the continuous,
almost like a
the anus ring that was repetitive.
Wow. There you go. There's that.
There is that.
Glad they did away with that set. The thing crapped out a lot of wrestlers.
Indeed, it did.
I lost my train of thought.
SmackDown only became a thing because of The Rock.
Well, yeah.
Well, I think it became.
SmackDown phrase.
Well, so let's be clear, and this is where I think a lot of times that stuff gets confused, is that WWE came up with that phrase. The Rock made it successful.
Yeah.
There is no Dwayne The Rock Johnson without the WWE.
Right.
As much as I would, go to banter with everybody over this next individual, CM Punk would not have gotten a shot at being a UFC fighter if it wasn't for his time in WWE.
How did he do in that fight?
He lost.
Oh, he got trashed.
He lost.
He did.
Most glorious. My favorite picture of CM Punk was the picture of him after his second fight.
And both of them.
So,
Awful.
Wait. I thought your favorite picture of him was
no, you shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
When he had the belt.
So-
when he was holding that title, right? Yeah.
He was
Nauseating
jumping up,
just thinking about it.
excited when CM Punk won at Money
I
in the
will-
Bank
I
in
will-
Chicago.
I will jump up and get excited over that the first time that Chris decides to hug Sami Zayn.
Oh, I'll hug him.
He'll hug him and break every rib he's got.
That's right.
A bear hug?
I was thinking like a chokehold from behind until he goes to sleep.
Right.
Oh, okay, all right. So, anyways, get back to the topic of the rings from SmackDown and crapping out wrestlers. So, you're right that it was branded around The Rock. I mean, they did. One of the video games came out was SmackDown Just Bring It.
Well, he had his own pay-per-view.
Right,
Named
Rock Bottom.
Rock Bottom. Not
So-
to be confused, Zach, with Bach Rodham.
It's,
That's a Morganism for those of you that were not on the WrestleMania trip.
yes, and there is a book full of those. So, anyways, if that was a different world than what we're in now, and here's what I mean by that. When WWE and WCW, when SmackDown first launched, if you remember that when SmackDown first came out, what were they trying to compete against?
Raw.
Nope. When SmackDown first came out, what was the purpose of WWE creating SmackDown? What show were they trying to compete with? Double K?
You might have me on this one. Go for it.
So what was WCW's secondary show? Thunder.
Thunder, right? Yeah.
SmackDown was
Monday Night
created.
Nitro.
SmackDown was created to compete with WCW Thunder.
God, I feel ashamed of myself that I forgot about it. But if you think about it, exact same color scheme.
Yeah.
The whole nine.
So
well-
you were still Dad's little squirt. So when that show was created, they were created to compete against WCW Thunder. Now, and even if you think about the design of the shows, the industrial look itself was still very similar. To what we got when we got SmackDown. The color scheme, the industrial look, the rugged edges, the subpar product. Not performers, but they just didn't put as much effort into it as they did their main shows.
No.
And I get it. But now WWE put WCW out of business. And WWE has now led to a rebirth with NXT, which nobody will ever change my mind that the reason why the indie scene in wrestling has taken off the way it has is because of the influence of NXT and the ability to show that this still works on a small scale.
Well, sure.
No doubt.
So, and we've noticed it even in our own area, the plethora of wrestling agencies that are coming out and new talent, new wrestlers. I mean, it's just, there's more life in it now than there has been in my lifetime.
Well, around us, yeah, but in our immediate, not yet. But
It's coming.
It's coming soon.
It's coming.
Maybe like fall this year.
Yes. So
Real soon.
it's going to be very interesting to see how this world changes now. And here's the picture I just want you to take in for a second is WWE put WCW out of business. They put ECW out of business, which wasn't hard. But
No.
when they accomplished both of those, they became the monopoly of the wrestling industry. Then TNA put up a good fight, but they made the mistake.
For a little while.
Well,
yeah.
and they made the mistake of doing what I'm glad AEW is not doing,
Mm-hmm.
and they tried to go head to head with WWE
Same night as Monday Night Raw.
at the same time,
Yep.
and we know how that turns out. We've seen it twice.
Well, that
Last
man,
place.
and if you really stop and think about it, too, look at a lot of the guys that TNA had doing the booking.
Well,
They were a lot of the same guys that were doing the booking down
Think about it. How
the
many of
fatal
wrestlers
final.
came from-
Yeah.
Well, and if you ever want an interesting video to watch, one of my favorite DVDs or WWE home videos, whatever you want to call it, that I've always enjoyed is the rise and fall of WCW.
Yes.
And some of those guys that they talked to that were around towards the end of that business, they will tell you that they put the wrestlers in charge, and that was a really bad idea. Because wrestlers are really good at booking themselves and building their talent, but they're not always great business people.
Well, if you want, let's pinpoint a match from that DVD. But anybody who was really following the two brands back then will remember this vividly. I feel like one of the massive turning points for the downfall was the Kevin Nash Goldberg match, in which Kevin Nash ended the streak because Scott Hall tased Goldberg a couple times, and that's how it ended.
That was awful.
So you just took everything that you had built
And
in a dominant performer, and
you ruined it.
And you ruined it because then it was just never the same.
you
well,
flushed
and-
it down the toilet.
And then they had the in my opinion, one of the greatest Goldberg matches from the WCW era that nobody got to see. The Goldberg DDP match at Halloween Havoc in, what was it, I think 1999? Was it 98, 99?
Somewhere
around
somewhere
there.
in
Wasn't it because they over?
Well, they didn't pay for overages on their pay-per-view, as where WWF at the time did pay for their overages. And they would always pay to run over 10 or 15 minutes just in case.
Right.
But the guys running WCW at the time, Hogan, Nash, Hall, the wrestlers that were running the business, and I get why it was a business decision from Turner Corporation, because they made the decision of, hey, it's cheaper. We're already paying these guys. I don't have to pay somebody else a whole nother salary to run the business. I'll just let them wrestle, and I'll add a few extra bucks to their paycheck so for them to run the business.
Well, that and the zeros that were being added to those guys back then were astronomical. Like, if you go back and look at some of those salaries, man, it was ridiculous. I mean, and because it was to everybody. It wasn't just to your Hogans, your Nashes, your Goldbergs. It was to everybody.
And then when you flip that and you look at what happened, one of my most favorite lines out of that whole DVD was, and I can't remember what, I think it might have been Jim Cornette that said it, but he made the statement of, he was talking about Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah.
And he said that Jeff Jarrett, they spent all that money on him and they put that belt on him, and he never made a damn dime for that company. So they made him their star.
Yeah.
But there is no ability, there's no proof that anybody can provide that he actually drew fans in. Clearly he didn't, because you went out of business.
Yeah.
So, and I love Double J. I mean, we can sit in this room, in this studio, and there is a picture with us standing with Double J that we had the chance to meet. And we've got an autograph from his Hall of Fame ceremony.
I mean, as the person, as the guy that we met, there's absolutely not one thing negative that you can say about the guy.
And so TNA tried to go head to head with WWE.
Again, made him the big
He was the guy.
head
Right.
honcho.
We saw. Well, they didn't make him the big head honcho. He was. He built that company. He was one of the co-founders that founded TNA. But it escalated. And what happened when it got to that level? When they decided to go head to head with WWE, where did Jeff Jarrett go?
Gone.
He left.
He didn't go home, but he didn't stay there either.
So this is my opinion as to why. Is he was probably one of the few guys in the room that was sitting there going, this isn't going to work.
Right.
No.
Like, I've seen where this goes. This isn't going to work.
We're going to fail, and we're going to fail hard.
What you're doing is not a good idea. And so they bailed.
They probably could have made it work if they wouldn't have tried to head on head.
Well, I think you're right. If they had just let it build gradually over
Choose a
more
different night other than Monday.
Well, let it grow gradually over more years.
Sure.
You know?
Build a following,
Yeah.
and then have that conversation about where you want to go next. But I don't feel like that conversation ever got had.
No.
Well, no, I mean
It was, this is where we are, and I want to go right here, right now.
right, and that's
That doesn't
it
work
just
like
doesn't
that.
work. I mean,
No.
you're taking on an absolute juggernaut in the wrestling industry. You have no shot. Like, I mean, at that time, think about it. At that time, really, there were just a handful of names in TNA that the world would recognize at that time.
Yeah, sure.
You know, at that exact moment in time, the world didn't know who AJ Styles was.
No. Well, they kind of knew a glimpse of what AJ Styles
But
was
did-
because we
but-
got that brief taste of him in WCW and WWE.
But did you know him? No, you really didn't. You didn't know AJ Styles and all that he was capable of because when he was in WWE, he got, pushed to the back of the line.
Right.
WCW, he got pushed to the back of the line. So, yeah, we saw glimpses of him in, jobber squash matches in which he was not coming out on the positive end. So,
Right.
what did you really know? Oh, man, that guy's really good. If, something we've said about some guys around here, if he gets the right eyes on his product, well, he had the right eyes on his product, and they let him go twice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now he's the best in the business.
Yeah, and so here's where I'm a little confused or concerned. Is so again when we stay on this topic of what happens in October when WWE moves to Fox, AEW is going to launch some sort of weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that they're going to have. Mm-hmm. So back then, WWE ruled. Even now, they rule the world, essentially, of professional wrestling at
Fair.
that level.
Right.
Now we're going to see a potentially high-bidding competitor that's going to come in and challenge the juggernaut, but they're not going directly after their throat. So you think about this. So there's an adage that you learn when you're a kid, and that is the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Mm-hmm. So AEW is not going for the throat like TNA is or did. They're picking and choosing
Right.
and taking little bites out of the elephant, whether it be star power or whether it be cheap shots that they're taking via social media, which, don't get me wrong, WWE, Triple H himself has done some of those. He's shared some tweets that have been kind of choppy at AEW.
How about the Hall of Fame speeches?
Yes.
DX's Hall of Fame speech
every single one of the members
was
of
a
DX,
big smear campaign against the AEW.
Billy Gunn and AEW.
Right.
And so you think about that, and it makes you ask the question of how different is the wrestling industry going to look a year from now?
Back to where we were at the beginning, I think it's going to look a lot different. Again, not so much because AEW has come in and cut a leg or two off of the elephant, but because they forced WWE to evolve again in a very positive way.
Sure.
And it could be a good thing for the wrestling companies in general. Make it as popular as it used to be.
Well, honestly, I
don't think it's ever been more popular than what it is right now.
No.
Your ratings can say whatever they want to say. The only thing that's not popular right now is the piss-poor booking decisions that WWE is making.
But that's where I'm going. That's exactly where I'm at. They don't have to make great ones right now because they're the only show in town.
Right. There's nobody that's challenging them.
Right.
Yet.
I mean, that happens on every level. When you're the only show in town, what do you really have to do?
You don't really improve when you ain't got nothing.
Wrestling fans are going to come to your show and watch your show, no matter how good or bad it is, if there's nobody else in town to push you. Then when you get that new one, AEW,
You get that push, and you're like, okay,
yeah.
we need to change something.
So I think it's going to look dramatically different in a year and a half from now, and it's because WWE has risen from the ashes and decided, all right, let's bury another one.
So my next question to that is this the event that forces Vince to say, all right, Paul, it's yours. You take it. Or does he start by saying, you know what, I'm going to let you have SmackDown?
I think if he is the smart businessman that he is and that we have all seen for many years, and I think if he takes ego and pride out of it, yes, I think Hunter deserves to have that shot. I mean, look at NXT.
Yeah.
Look what
That's-
he did to NXT.
That's the only freaking resume you need.
Right.
Well,
Is
yeah.
NXT.
I mean, we've talked about plenty of times on this show that, or on various shows, that, you know, that being the brainchild of Hunter,
Right.
and what he has done with that, you know, we've even talked about it within our own circle of friends that we now are more excited to watch takeovers than we are to watch main roster pay-per-views.
Right, because, I mean, it's easy to predict what's going to happen. Watching,
Well, we say that, but there's only one person that's won our picks competition, you know, for the past 9 months.
She's cheating.
she is cheating. I think we had a rule that you couldn't, you know, really research, read dirt sheets, predictions, things
Yeah,
like that before
yeah.
you make your picks. I think that's her trick. I think we've never called her out and questioned her on that. And so, Ashley, if you're listening, we're on to you.
That's right.
But
That's our Brock Lesnar of our group.
Right. Show up when you want to. But where I was going with that is if you're watching a takeover and you're actually watching the match, you're not trying to predict it before the show comes on. You have no idea what's going to happen. You just don't know what's going to happen next, and you can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Then the next night, you watch the WWE pay-per-view, and as you're watching the match, you know exactly what's coming next.
Well,
Like,
and
oh, well, I know who's going to win.
like,
this
so
one.
here's what the
I know-
difference is.
All right, that happened. I figured that was going to happen.
Here's what the difference is for me. I get emotionally bought into to NXT matches, and I don't mean like, oh, boo-hoo, I'm so that this person lost. That's not what I'm talking about.
I've seen you cry.
It's I watched a whole row of grown men cry after the Roman Reigns Taker match, and he left his hat in the middle of the ring. So I don't want to hear it.
That's true.
So I
fact.
watched a whole row of grown men cry that
You
night.
got me there.
So-
You got me.
Yeah.
So because that was, in my opinion, that was the end of the era when that happened. Because it was, and I wish they would have left it that way.
That was the perfect way.
So
That was it.
Couldn't have done it any better.
No, you got it right. Don't mess it up.
Yeah. Although, if I look back at it now, I probably would say that after WrestleMania 26, his second consecutive match with Shawn Michaels,
Yeah.
that was probably the last epic Undertaker match that we have seen.
Yeah.
I love the guy, but that was the last epic match. that
Oh
we
no,
have
I still
seen.
get up just as much now as I did when he comes out.
Well,
but the in-ring part, I'm like,
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like
Okay.
it's just not what it was.
well, it can't be.
Well,
I mean, it's
right.
like that for everybody.
Yeah. That's like when Ric Flair, watching him wrestle for the last couple of years of his life, when every time he hit the mat, all of his skin fell off the bones and came back.
Right. That's fair. I mean,
So-
that is fair.
So, anyways, to get back to our topic of, this all started with a wild card rule and how this evolves into, the shows. I don't know how you maintain this when you get to October.
It's going to be interesting.
You know what? Stop and think about it though. If they maintain it through, the network split, we've heard of brand splits. Now we got a network split.
The first network split for the company, actually.
Yeah, I think that it actually could be pretty interesting. If you got a guy showing up on Monday Night Raw doing one thing, performing a certain way, then all of a sudden he's able to show up, or she is able to show up on Friday night on a completely different show with a completely different set of rules. I think it could be really, really, really interesting.
But is it really a completely different set of rules?
I mean, we won't know until we're speculating.
How different is the product going to be? That's my question. Is how different is SmackDown Live going to be on a completely different network that's really going to set completely different expectations?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be a different set of rules.
Or is it going to be as predictable
Because-
as it is right now?
I think it's going to be a different set of rules because it's a completely different network. And I think they already have a completely different set of expectations for that product. I expect SmackDown to be even a little more edgier than Raw.
So, do we see a shift back to the ruthless aggression era? Or do we see a shift back to the attitude era?
God, I hope so.
Yes, the best era in wrestling.
I don't think they can go now in today's society, in today's world.
Full attitude. I don't think they can.
There's no way they can go full attitude.
Well, they could, but there's no network that would condone it.
Right.
Because of the PC era that we live in, it wouldn't make it.
Here's a thought. Think about it this way. You remember how when you had WWF, you had WCW, and you had ECW? You remember how everybody looked and kind of turned their nose up at ECW because of the way the product was?
Yeah.
In today's society, if WWE were to go back to the Attitude Era, that's how they would be viewed.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is ridiculous.
So,
I mean, they did some things that were, you look back on now and you're like, oh, God.
Probably shouldn't have done that.
yeah, a lot of DX's segments would not fly.
Most all of them.
Now, a lot of Austin's
Like when they moved
segments
the camera.
would not fly. A lot of The Rock's promos that he cut would not fly.
What are you talking about, pie?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. Strudel?
Yeah. Yeah, Strudel, that's another one. Ric Flair's Mountain.
That would be Space Mountain.
Yeah, that
For all you young folks that are listening.
that would not fly. Not in the context of the way they would do it back then.
Well, I'm pretty sure Ric Flair's Space Mountain doesn't fly now anyway. So I don't think we have to worry about it.
Well, at least I hope it's not flying. And if it is, good for him.
I think it might have an out of
I've
order
had about
sign
all
hanging
that
on the door.
I've had about all that conversation I want to have.
Terrible. Don't even want to picture it anymore.
No, I mean, it's like a noodle inside of a sack of skin. So,
Good God.
so when you when you think about what the wrestling industry is going to look like a year from now, I just don't know. I want to believe that the presence of AEW is going to force the WWE to turn it up a notch, to go back to having a better quality product, something that's less predictable. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're going to keep the same writers and the same guys doing your creative that you got right now, well, guess what you're going to keep getting?
We watch it every week. We know what we're going to keep getting.
Right.
Same thing.
So, I mean, that's the nature of... So, I even had this conversation with some of the folks that I work with this past week. We talked about the definition of insanity, which is repeating the same behavior, expecting a different outcome. So, I mean, that is the definition of insanity. You can't repeat the same behavior and expect a different outcome. If you do, then guess what? You're insane.
Right. Well, okay, so to that, I don't think all these years that it's just been WWE that they've expected a different outcome. They haven't really needed a different outcome because they've been the only show in town.
Well,
Like
that's
what
what
I'm
I'm...
talking about. There's nobody there to
There's,
push them for
but I'm hoping that
change.
AEW forces that change.
Oh, I hope so. I do expect that to happen, and I do expect WWE to ramp it up. And this might make some people mad that are listening, but I feel like at some point they will squash AEW.
But we don't know.
We don't know.
Well, no,
And-
that's why we're sitting here doing this little thing called speculating.
Right, and the reality of it is that there is no easy way to tell how this is going to go. One of the things that we have to think about is, what does this look like when WWE gets the challenge from AEW, AEW combats, and starts scheduling shows on the same night, pay-per-views on the same night.
That, I think, is when it creates a problem.
For which company?
I think that's when it would only create a problem for WWE.
Okay.
Because,
If AEW can do it right.
well, right, but if they schedule them on the same night, just out of curiosity,
People are
people are going to watch. They're going to probably give them 1, 2, maybe 3 of those and really check them out. if AEW drops the ball in any way, shape, or form, well, that's over. That experiment's done. I think.
But if you get a better product, all of those fans are going to stop.
But who becomes the true face of AEW? Right now, they don't have a face. I think they're trying to make it Cody Rhodes.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that their face is Cody Rhodes.
But-
I think their face right now is a mixture between Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega.
Right.
I think those are your faces of that company.
But can they carry a company? Kenny, obviously has done really well. Cody, I think, and the Young Bucks, I think it remains to be seen if they can go head to head with, the best in the business.
And I also think that it's a different wrestling world with the fans now.
Well, sure it is.
Than what it used to be. The fan base is different. It requires different modifications in your programming. So you think about WWE and what has been their bread and butter for the past really 12, 13 years.
Children.
Is children. I mean, that's been their bread and butter. That's not who AEW is going to attract. They're going after your 18 to 35-year-olds, that demographic that is being alienated almost by the WWE. Because WWE, I don't care what anybody in this room would want to tell me or anybody else that would be listening would want to tell me, is they have catered to children so much. How many times have we seen the same storylines just repackaged, put on a different superstar,
over
and then given to us again?
Over.
I've been watching wrestling since 1994, 95.
Don't lie.
And so, well, I was still a kid then. It's not my fault that you were already a teenager. So, when...
I wasn't even born.
No. Yeah.
We won't talk about where you were.
Yeah, no.
The number 4 comes to mind, though.
That's true.
4B.
And pressure.
That's 4B over there.
Yep, 4B. And it's a combination between pressure and what makes most people uncomfortable. But, anyways, when back ever since then, how many times have we seen the rise against the authority? So,
over and over.
The Rock
and
said
over.
it best at WrestleMania 30 during what, in my mind, is the most iconic moment in WrestleMania history.
Was that in the Silverdome?
That was, in the Silver Dome.
By Hulk Hogan?
Yep, Hulk Hogan. And folks, if you ever get the opportunity to go watch the DVD set, The Anthology of Hulk Hogan, there is a promo in there that he cuts with Mean Gene where he calls himself Hulk Hogan. So you will most likely always hear us refer to him that way as Hulk Hogan. But you think about what The Rock said in that match or in that segment was he talked about, there was a guy that was going to come out and wrestle that night in the name of hustle, loyalty, and respect. But that doesn't happen unless a guy back in the late 80s, early 90s came out and pledged to eat his vitamins, drink your milk.
Say your prayers.
Say your prayers.
Eat your vitamins.
Eat your vitamins.
I will tell you, I have a shirt that proves it. Hulkamania, ladies and gentlemen, was established in 1984.
So, I mean, but still, when he said that, and then he went on to say that there was another guy that was going to come out and rise against the authority against all odds. And he said that doesn't happen unless someone else not only had the ability to stick it to the boss, but whip his candy ass. And he was talking about Steve Austin. So we've seen these same storylines time and time again, just repackaged and put on somebody different. We've seen the rise against the authority with how many different people? Dolph Ziggler, John Cena, Daniel Bryan, now Roman Reigns. I mean,
well, Roman Reigns twice.
I think we can even
Shield.
sprinkle a little Becky Lynch in there.
Becky Lynch. I mean, there's so many people that we could go through and say we've seen this same storyline. And it's that you could even go back to, even though it was cheesy and corny, it was still really entertaining to watch. The Kurt Angle and Milk segments when he was intensity, integrity, intelligence.
Right.
The 3 eyes and drinking his milk. I mean, all of that stuff that doesn't happen without the original storylines being created 25 years ago, 35, 40 years ago.
Right. And I'll say it again, though. They haven't been forced to create anything new.
No.
They can just reinvent the wheel, throw it on television, and 2.1 million people are going to still watch.
Yeah. So I want to change the topic of the conversation just a little bit and focus less on WWE and more on AEW. Let's talk about them. They're expected next week to announce a deal with, of all people, Turner Television. Which, folks, if that sounds familiar, the reason why is because Double K, who was WCW's last television network?
I feel pretty confident that it was Turner.
It was Turner.
And forgive me for maybe cutting off a little shorter, but didn't we just have a whole 30-minute conversation on recreating and reinventing the wheel?
Yes.
So I feel like we've been here.
We have. And WWE is now going to have to compete once again with Turner Television.
All right, so here's a question about it for you guys.
Is it going to be a reinvention, or is it going to be new and improved?
Kind of along those lines is my question. What did Turner learn the first go-around?
That you don't put wrestlers in charge of your business.
True. Fact.
Hey, but just in case, I'm going to raise my hand. Nobody can see this, but just in case you didn't know who's running AEW.
Wrestlers.
Yeah.
Wrestlers.
I kind of feel like we're, again, theme of the night, folks. Here you go. Reinventing the wheel.
Yeah,
and I feel like that wheel went real flat at some point.
Real fast.
Well, not necessarily real fast, but it damn sure went flat and never came back.
and it never really, they never responded quite the way that you would have thought that they would have with the talent that they had on that show.
No,
If you looked at talent, WCW should have squashed WWE.
All right, let's really, speaking of AEW and a name that is kind of prominent and synonymous with AEW now, WCW pissed away a young Chris Jericho and thought he would never amount to anything. How'd that work out for him? I don't think that worked out very well. I mean, like you said, look at the roster. I mean, obviously we know the Nashes, the Hogans, the Halls, Randy Savage. You've got all these guys. Don't forget we had a young Rey Mysterio.
Yep.
Who they even went so far as to unmask it for about a year.
Towards the end of the time.
Towards the end, they took Rey Mysterio's mask off.
That didn't make any sense.
Which, in my opinion, killed the Rey Mysterio gimmick. And because I mean, you just
It took away the mystery of him being Mysterio.
right.
Right?
So I mean, you had this plethora of talent, and it's the exact same thing that AEW is building right now. They're stockpiling talent, lesser known talent in a lot of circles. It's not your big John Cena type names, is what I mean by lesser known. Not the fact that people don't know who Cody Rhodes or the Young Bucks or Kenny Omegas are. But let's face it, they're not John Cena. They're not Dwayne Johnson. They're not Steve Austin. So they're not Roman Reigns. They're right. So these guys still have to prove that they can do it, as far as I'm concerned. And I think all signs point to, so far, the biggest blow to WWE is coming soon, as far as Jon Moxley goes.
Yeah, it's still, my jury is out on that. And here's why, is I'm still not sure that's where he's going.
I've gone on record a couple times now on our first two shows when this has come up. First, we were talking about Dean Ambrose in episode 1. Then last week, we were talking about Jon Moxley.
That's true.
And I've said the same thing. I'm still not sure. But either WWE is doing a really, really good job of playing this one off, or he's going to pop up. Now, we talked earlier about who's the face of AEW.
Yeah.
Let's say Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, pops up on AEW.
You think he becomes a new face?
potential.
There's probably a lot of Benjamins going his way that say he's
They have
gonna,
thrown big money at
That's what
every
I'm
name.
Well, right, but they've thrown huge money at Dean Ambrose, John Moxley, whoever we want to call him right now. I don't know. I don't see him going there and just being another performer. I don't. So I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know that he's going to go to AEW. He's going to go somewhere. That's clear. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think the John Moxley part comes out if he's not going somewhere. But for all we know, it could have just been an attempt for him to rebrand himself and then come back somewhere.
Maybe he comes back in October as the new face of SmackDown Live on Fox.
I mean, that I wouldn't be disappointed by it.
No, absolutely not. Maybe he really...
If it's done right.
Right, but maybe he really does just want to take his time off, recuperate, kind of re-energize, refuel, however you want to say it. WWE gives him that grand send-off as Dean Ambrose, and so now he's going to come back re-energized, refocused, remotivated, and try and take SmackDown Live on Fox.
And who knows? So we're going to twist things up a little bit now because I think we've had a lot of open dialogue and discussion about AEW and WWE. I only want to talk about one superstar specifically, just because I was excited about some news that I read about them, and that was we can now confirm, because it has been confirmed, that Goldberg did sign on to perform in a match.
Okay.
At the Saudi Arabia event.
Okay.
An opponent has not been announced, but the speculation is that we're going to get Goldberg versus Bobby Lashley.
Oh, I'm down for that.
In Saudi Arabia.
That was one we threw out last week.
That was one we threw out last week. So I thought that would be cool for us to bring back up and talk about. But I just, I kind of wanted to do something a little fun, a little bit different with this episode, because I want to test our knowledge.
Uh-oh.
So this is going to be our first episode where we're going to have Wrestle Rewind trivia. And I'm going to give Double K and Smokey Z an opportunity to test their wrestling knowledge. And this first game is going to consist of 10 questions. And each one of you gets an ability to answer. And then I'll tell you what the correct answer is. So, we're going to start off with Double K. Not in the most recent one, but several years ago, back when the first brand split took place. The first ever brand split between SmackDown and Raw. Mm-hmm. What do they do to decide who's on what roster? They've done it every time.
They had a draft.
They have a draft, right? Mm-hmm. Who was the overall first draft pick in the first ever WWE brand split draft?
It was John Cena.
It was not. I'm going to give you 4 options.
Okay. Sorry. I was just thinking. I had it on the brain.
That was going to be my guess.
Yeah, you jumped the gun.
Well, I figured he was going to say it, so I want to say it first.
So here we go.
I like winning.
Who was the first overall draft pick in the first draft? Was it Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, or Test?
Do I have to buzz in?
No, you don't have to buzz in. You can. I'll let you guess first, and then Smokey Z can guess. Next episode, we'll have to get some music to play.
Right. Yeah.
During this, yeah.
So. I feel like this was your Vince McMahon moment.
So it was
when you just created like the wild card rule out of thin freaking air.
Well, no, I didn't. It wasn't that bad.
I'm just saying.
I'm not going to change it a little bit later on.
It came out of nowhere. I wasn't ready. I'm going to go The Rock.
The Rock?
I'm going to go Test.
Smokey Z says Test. The first overall draft pick was the great one, The Rock. So that's 1 point for Double K.
Suck it, Smokey.
He does. It's just a vape. So, So, the second question. Who was the first WWE superstar to capture the Money in the Bank contract 2 WrestleManias in a row? Back when it was done at WrestleMania, because that's where Money in the Bank started. Mm-hmm. Was it CM Punk, Rob Van Dam, Edge, or Mr. Kennedy?
Boy, he disappeared.
He went to TNA for a little
He became Mr. Anderson, and then he became Mr. Nothing.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. He disappeared. He was part of Bully Ray's biker gang.
Yeah.
Who was the second person you said?
CM Punk, Rob Van Dam, Mr. Kennedy, or Edge?
2 in a row.
2 in a row at WrestleMania.
I'm torn between 2 right now.
Smokey Z, you got a guess?
Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Kennedy is Smokey Z's guess.
I'm going Edge.
Double K says Edge. You are both incorrect. It was CM Punk.
See, I was torn between Edge and CM Punk.
I was torn between Mr. Kennedy because I know Mr. Kennedy won twice.
So our next question. Who is the only WWE superstar who has captured the Intercontinental Championship 8 times? Is it Edge, Christian, Shelton Benjamin, or Chris Jericho?
I'm going Jericho.
Jericho.
We all knew the answer to that one. That was
That
Jericho.
was kind of a layup right there.
Because there's someone that's tied with him. Who's tied with him?
The Miz.
The Miz is tied with him. So now let's look at which of the following never became an ECW champion? Tommy Dreamer.
Which ECW?
Just ECW in general.
Okay, all right.
So whether it was ECW pre-WWE
Okay.
or ECW post-WWE.
Okay.
Tommy Dreamer, Rob Van Dam, Batista, or Chavo Guerrero?
Batista.
Batista is correct.
Stop copying me, dude.
Double K still leads with 1 point. No,
What?
you still lead.
Oh, okay.
You still
You
lead
said
with
I
1
led
point.
with one. I got it. Never mind.
Yeah, you lead with 1 point,
Right.
as in you have 3.
Okay.
Smokey Z's got 2.
Right. That's usually when you say you lead by 1, but that's okay. You know what? Continue, Mr. Trebek.
Suddenly had a flashback to Celebrity Jeopardy off of SNL.
Thought you were gonna
That's
say
not
Hot
what
Flash
your
for a
mother
second.
said, Trebek. Which 2 WWE superstars today, in the past, both attended WrestleMania 6 in the Toronto Sky Dome? Do you need me to repeat that?
Got it. Nope. Who's at
Matt
WrestleMania
and Jeff
6?
Hardy, Finley and Hornswoggle, the Dudley Boys, or Edge and Christian?
Edge and Christian.
Edge and Christian.
Edge and Christian is correct.
Kind of makes sense.
Number 6. What year did WrestleMania officially debut? 1985, 1984, 1975, or 1990?
85.
84.
80. We have. Oh, so there is a split here. It debuted in 1985. Question number 7.
Hulk Hogan's music just started
What
playing in my head. after that
Hogan.
What started the WWE Alliance conflict in 2001? Shane and Stephanie McMahon bought WCW and ECW and formed the Alliance. Ted Turner and Paul Heyman disagreed to the WWE to be bought. WCW and ECW were bankrupt, so they blamed WWE. Raw was dominating over Nitro. WCW joined forces with ECW to invade the WWE together.
Going option A.
Yep.
This might be the worst question that I've asked so far.
Yep.
Yeah, that one was... I don't know. The Jericho one was pretty obvious, too.
Yeah.
In WrestleMania 2000, which McMahon was on the side of the Big Show in the Fatal 4-Way match for the WWE
What
Championship? 2000, WrestleMania 2000. Was it Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, Stephanie, or Linda?
What was the question?
Which McMahon was on the side of the Big Show in a Fatal 4-Way match for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 2000?
Shane. I
Double K's,
know it wasn't Linda because
Double K is going to go with Shane.
You know what? I'm going to feel real stupid because I literally just watched this match about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Shane.
With Shane,
You're just trying not to lose, Smokey.
it was Shane McMahon.
No, because I was sitting there thinking, I was like,
Yeah, I really
Shane is
did.
the only one I could think of.
I really did watch that match about 2 to 3 weeks ago. I'm
I
not
watched
kidding.
the Alliance one like a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
so.
All right. In one of Monday Night Raw's greatest moments, what did former Raw GM Eric Bischoff promise Chris Jericho and John Cena in their match for the WWE Championship later that night? That the loser would be fired? The winner would be immune from being challenged for the championship? The loser will be given a night off from the next Raw? Or none of the above?
I'll go with none of the above.
Yeah, that's where I was going to.
Two